Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar. This is a webinar on being proactive and being prepared, planning for when life happens. Thank you for joining us. My name is Brian Ottinger. I'm a certified financial planner with Vintage Financial Partners. We are a boutique financial planning firm located in Rockville, Maryland, and in Annapolis, Maryland. A vintage plan is designed to last a lifetime. On the topic of estate planning and frankly on financial planning, I'm always reminded of Benjamin Franklin's famous quote, "If you fail to plan, you are planning to fail." So with that, one little quick housekeeping item. There's a Q&A button at the bottom center of your screen. I will have some time at the end for questions. If you would like to ask a question, you can type it in using that functionality at any time, and then I'll have some time, as I said, at the end to go through and answer whatever questions folks might have. With that, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, this is some light reading from our legal department. Essentially, what you need to know is that I'm not an attorney, and this is not to be considered legal advice. I am also not an accountant, and so this is not to be considered tax advice. For the most part, this presentation is for informational purposes only, and hopefully we can all learn something new today. The estate planner's dilemma. I'm always surprised when I see these statistics. While the data is a few years old, recent studies show that these numbers have not changed dramatically. With the current COVID-19 situation that's going on, there have been some very recent studies that has indicated an uptick in estate planning, but that doesn't take away from the overall theme that it's not being done by as many people that really should be focusing in on that. And so what we're going to do today is learn the importance of estate planning, what it's actually meant by this overused term of estate planning. I think most people think of either a will or an attorney when that word is used. And so we're going to go through and explain to you our approach to estate planning. When we talk about estate planning, we look at three things. We try to keep the conversation conversational, which is to say we want to try and keep the topic at a very high level. In doing so, we discuss what we know will happen, what you hope will happen, and frankly, what you hope will never happen to you and your family. Today, we're going to address all three of these questions in the framework of your medical needs, your financial and legal needs, and then finally, your legacy wishes. Living will and a Maryland Advance Directive. So let's start with your medical needs and wishes. As I mentioned, our office is located in Rockville and in Annapolis, Maryland, and so we'll be focusing in on the state of Maryland. If you live outside of the state of Maryland, your specific state laws might vary slightly. So what's the difference between an advance directive and a living will? An advance directive is a set of instructions someone prepares in advance of ill health that determines healthcare wishes. A living will is one type of an advance directive that becomes effective when a person is terminally ill. Aging with Dignity is an organization that created this pamphlet called 5 Wishes. 5 Wishes is a type of a living will with a conversational approach, hence the reason why we mention it and why we like it. It has been described as a living will with a heart and soul. It's worth taking a look at. A lot of states will recognize this document as a living will. However, there are 8 states that will require additional documentation. Also, this is not a recommendation or an endorsement on my part. It's simply making everybody aware that there are resources such as this available to you when trying to approach what could be considered a difficult subject. Maryland MOLST is a medical order for life-sustaining treatment. This order form makes your treatment wishes known to healthcare professionals. Frankly, I think that Stan Stovall can do a much better job explaining what a MOLST is than I. And so I'm going to play for you a short video with Stan.
Hello, I'm Stan Stovall of WVAL TV 11 News. I know these issues are hard to think about and discuss, but it's important to be sure you and your loved ones are taken care of properly. With all of the technological advances in healthcare, it's more important now than ever. Let's talk about a new form that can be of use to you. It's a medical orders or life-sustaining treatment form, or MOLST form for short. That's MOLST. The MOLST form is a medical order signed by a physician, nurse practitioner, or physician's assistant, which affirms your wishes in regard to a set of medical interventions related to your current medical condition. Because it is a standard form and only 2 pages, in a crisis, medical providers can quickly glance at the MOLST form and see what choices you have made. The MOLST form contains medical orders regarding whether you want cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or CPR, and whether you want other life-sustaining treatments related to your current medical condition. The MOLST form's orders are based on your consent or the consent of your authorized decision maker if you can no longer make decisions for yourself. The MOLST orders can also be based on your advance directives instructions. You should discuss with your physician, nurse practitioner, or physician's assistant what option regarding CPR makes the most sense for you given your medical condition and your goals for your care. If you do choose a DNR order, you may wish to discuss with your healthcare provider whether you should get a DNR or MOLST bracelet. You should understand the differences between an advance directive and a MOLST form. A MOLST form contains medical orders that are relevant to your current medical condition. An advance directive contains preferences about treatments sometime in the future. An advance directive is not a medical order. It does not stop emergency medical service providers from attempting cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or CPR. In fact, emergency medical service providers are required to attempt CPR unless there is a no CPR order or a signed MOLST order form. For example, suppose I'm at home and I have chest pains. I ask my wife to call 911. By the time the ambulance arrives, I've lost consciousness. The emergency medical technicians rush in and my wife says, "Here's his advance directive. He does not want to be resuscitated." Well, the EMS providers will still proceed to do everything they can to revive me because the advance directive is not a medical order. However, the MOLST form is a medical order, and all healthcare providers are required by law to follow it. The MOLST form makes it clear to family, friends, and caregivers what medical treatments you want or do not want. It can prevent arguments. It can relieve the people you care most about from the burden of making that very difficult decision. The MOLST form goes where you go, to the hospital, to rehab, to assisted living, nursing home, dialysis center, and back home. And it's reviewed every time your medical situation changes. When a MOLST form is filled out, your provider will only complete those parts of the form about which you have made decisions. Filling out a MOLST form is completely voluntary, but if you don't fill out a MOLST form, everyone will assume that you want every treatment available, like CPR, machines to help you breathe, or blood transfusions. Ask your doctor, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant if a MOLST form is appropriate for you or your loved one. You can learn more about MOLST by going to the Maryland MOLST webpage. That's MarylandMOLST, all one word, .org. Again, MarylandMOLST.org.
Okay, thanks, Stan. Remember, if you go to the website marylandmost.org, that this order form must be signed by a doctor or a nurse practitioner. File of Life is an important informational packet. We usually recommend placing this packet on your refrigerator. It will enable fire and rescue personnel to attain quick and accurate medical history when you or your family members are unable to do so. In most counties in the state of Maryland, fire and rescue personnel are trained to look on your refrigerator for this. You can get a sample of the information that you should put in the File for Life, as well as a refrigerator magnet to store that information from fileforlife.org. Organ donation is a very personal decision for everybody, and I recognize that. I only mention it here because there are resources available to answer questions that you might have. Please don't allow misinformation to keep you from saving lives, as there are many myths out there. One that I hear very often is, I'm not in the best health and nobody would want my organs or tissues. Sometimes people say my leftover parts. The reality of it is that that's not the case, and that there's information about that and many other myths on the website organdonor.gov. So I encourage people to go out to the website and learn what they can about this very personal decision. Okay, that concludes the medical portion for today. Let's go ahead and move on to the financial and legal section. What is a financial power of attorney? Financial power of attorney is a document that grants another person the legal authority to make financial decisions on your behalf should you be unable to do so. They are the person being named in the document, legally required to act in your best interest and on your behalf. So who should you name in that document? Well, that's a detailed conversation that you should consult an attorney in with regards to the options available to you. I always remind folks when this topic comes up that if you happen to not have a friend or family member that you want to name or trust to name, that there are attorneys or companies like trust companies that are willing to serve in that role on your behalf. If you do name a friend or family member, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has resources available to them that outlines their legal obligations to you and provides some advice and guidance to them and supports them in their role of helping you with your finances. A last will and testament is a legal document that communicates a person's final wishes pertaining to assets and dependents, as well as their final wishes for burial service. If you do not have a will, one will be provided for you by whichever state you live in or domicile in. The one that's provided for you might not be in line with what your wishes are. So we encourage everybody to draft and sign and execute a last will and testament. Okay, digital assets. The Revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act, which is a mouthful, is a law that was developed primarily by the Uniform Law Commission to provide fiduciaries, like executors and attorneys in fact, with a legal path to manage the digital assets of a deceased or incapacitated person. Digital assets, and the reason why we mention it here is that they're often overlooked when people think about establishing an estate plan. The reality of it is that each of us are gathering more and more and more digital assets every day. Things like our social media accounts, digital photography or family heirlooms, subscription accounts, digital media. You know, we actually recommend to families to go through what we would refer to as a digital fire drill, if you will. We all live digital lives, and in some cases, maybe our bank statements are no longer mailed to the house and they're simply emailed. And if your loved ones or if your fiduciaries or if your decision makers don't have access to this information, these accounts could be lost. And so we want people to pay extra special attention to all of the digital assets that make up their lives. Forms of insurance. So in short, insurance obviously is very important. It's a means of protection from a financial loss, but we view it also as an asset. And it's something that requires just as much attention as your other assets, but sometimes is often overlooked. Things like life insurance, long-term care, disability, they all have named beneficiaries and owners and possibly decision makers or powers of attorney. And those people named in the documents or in the contract of an insurance policy should be reviewed on a pretty regular basis and should coincide with the rest of your wishes and your overall estate plan. Okay, so that concludes the financial and legal portion for today. So let's start to discuss what this study shows, although it was done back in 2012, what most folks find to be the true value of an inheritance. And so what this study is showing is that most people feel that the real issues, or the important ones, would be one's life lessons or legacy. This study shows that most people are far more concerned about passing on these life lessons and values than they are financial assets. As a financial planner, we often spend a ton of time and energy aligning families' financial assets for the family. But often we forget or overlook aligning the family for those financial assets. Families with significant wealth are often concerned about how the next generation will handle that wealth. These are all conversations that most people think about, but rarely ever have. I've seen things such as a letter to my grandchild, or an open letter to my grandchildren, 10 things that I want them to know. I can tell you from experience, while financial assets and inheritance can come and go, even significant ones, letters like this would be treasured for a lifetime. And there are additional resources on this very complex topic of what's truly important being a legacy. We often find that families, certainly of first generation wealth, don't have an infrastructure in place to communicate with their family about money. There's resources like the Family Love Letter that helps by asking some thought-provoking questions. It also has fill in the blanks on everything from your financial professionals to contact information for those folks, passwords for computers, and frankly, what you would like to be remembered for. And so we encourage the use of these resources to help facilitate some of these conversations that families often don't have. So what are the key takeaways? Well, we recommend having a team in place made up of an attorney, a financial advisor, a tax accountant or CPA, medical or healthcare advisors, and even the succession decision makers. And it's the team of these folks made up in your financial life that will help guide you through this estate planning process, so that when the time comes that they need to act on your behalf, they're well informed with what your wishes and what your intentions have always been. And so with that concludes today's workshop. I appreciate everybody attending. Again, my name is Brian Ottinger. I'm with Vintage Financial Partners. Our website is vintagefinancialpartners.com. And we're here to help have these conversations and to help walk you through, as a member of your team, this process.